This episode of WDW Today is being sponsored by MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. And if you're planning your next trip to Walt Disney World, why not plan your trip with MEI and Mouse Fan Travel? That's right. You know, I use MEI and Mouse Fan Travel to plan my trips to Walt Disney World. When I'm staying on Disney World property, I give them a call and have them book my room for me. Not that I can't do it by myself, but why not? Why should I? Let someone else do it. I've done it a dozen times before, many, many times. I don't need to prove anything to myself anymore. Why not let them take care of all that little stuff so that way I can focus on whatever it is I want to focus on. Let them take care of it. Visit them online at www.mousefantravel.com.
This is Walt Disney World Today. Give us 5 minutes and we'll give you the world.
It's Wednesday, February 10th, 2010, and this is episode 680 of WDW Today. I'm Matt Hochberg of StudioCentral.com. Joining me on today's show is Mike Newell of Mouse World Radio. Mike, I know you hate being called on first, but you got no choice today.
Well, yeah, thanks. Nobody else wanted to show up, so, you know.
Yeah, that's right. We invited many podcasters to come with us. Unfortunately, none of them showed up.
So I was like, what, 6th or 7th on the list? What?
Yes, however, today is Fred Hazelton, the master statistician for the unofficial guide to Walt Disney World. And, of course, that's found online at touringplans.com. Welcome back to the show, Fred.
Hey, thanks, Matt. I've got my tequila and my Pop-Tarts, so I'm ready. I'm ready to be Len.
It's Len.
It's Len. See, just like
exactly.
It's Wednesday, and we're answering your listener questions. And we'll start out with a question from Shane Grizzard of Orlando, Florida. Snellville Shane on the boards. And Shane writes, "Hi, Annette, and the other guys if they're there. I've been going through the archives, and I see that many episodes on, quote, beating the heat and surviving the blistering temperatures we have in Florida every year. But after attending the 2010 marathon as a spectator, I was wondering what tips you had for those few and far between days in the winter when Walt Disney World reaches sub-zero temperatures. Some of the ideas I came up with are going to the Columbia Harbor House and relaxing on the second floor with a warm bowl of clam chowder, or curling up in front of the fireplace at Wilderness Lodge. After the half marathon, I ended up eating breakfast with Mr. Mangello at the Contempo Cafe, which was fun, but I would consider this a don't because the Contemporary has large, wide openings on either side of the resort that the monorail passes through, bringing a nice, cool breeze with it. Thanks, can't wait for TenFest 2010. You know, the marathon weekend this year was frigid, but of course, you know, that's really, and Shane kind of hit upon this. I mean, it's such a outlier in terms of temperatures because it doesn't usually get that cold, certainly in Walt Disney World, and at all. This year's been kind of weird. I think it's the El Nino thing because this whole, since really Christmas, it's been kind of cool. And I know when Floridians complain about cold, that means it's under 70. But
have the Floridians, were they blaming the cold weather on like some kind of front coming from Canada, even in Florida?
That's right. I
think they do on the East Coast.
Yes, El Nino is Spanish for Canada.
It's always our fault.
So, that's right. But I mean, you know, I think you're right, Shane. First of all, I mean, bring layers. You know, when you're dealing with cold temperatures, a lot of times, if you know that the forecast is going to be a little cooler, bring layers, bring jeans, bring sweatshirts, because one of the biggest things that I think people will run into is that they come down there unprepared clothing-wise, and you end up buying $60 sweaters, you know, that you may never wear again, or, you know, would look kind of weird wearing them outside of Disney World. So, you know, make sure you pack accordingly. One thing I like to do, you know, if you have an owner's locker, is pack, you know, a couple sweaters in there. Even, you know, just one trip, bring them down there, put them in there. So that way, in case you run into that kind of situation, you'll be okay. The good news is most attractions are indoors anyway because they're more afraid of rain than cold weather. So it's not usually a big deal. But maybe some of our listeners have some tips that they learned from, I know many of them were at the 2010 marathon, and they can share them at www.today.com.
Well, just as Ellen comes in handy when it's really hot to get out of the heat,
Yeah, right.
Ellen comes in handy when it's really cold to get out of the cold.
Nice. Next email's from Sue Barringer. Writes, "Hi guys, Sue from Pittsburgh here, SWB Mom on the forums.
Hooah.
Just wanted to say that I love Marvin and especially his very own theme music."
Oh, he has theme music now? Oh, of course, the Elephant Walk. Nice.
The Elephant Walk. "I think he needs his own line in the WDW Today store. Wouldn't it be beneficial to all if there was a large inflatable Marvin that could mark the spot of your meets during Reunion 2010? Keep the podcast coming. We love him."
Excellent. Where is Marvin today?
I don't know.
He's out shoveling.
He's out shoveling.
Marvin was invited onto the podcast right before me, right? Yeah.
That's right.
He's in line before.
Next email is from Meryl McKee. writes, I'm planning my first and my family's first, except my wife who went 17 years ago, trip to Walt Disney World. I have a rather large family, which makes the planning much more difficult. The girls ages 13 and 10, and the boys 7, 5, and will be 7 months old, plus the wife and I. We'll be traveling by direct flight to Orlando Sanford Airport on February 15th. Ooh, just got this one in. And going to a villa we rented just outside of Disney World. We'll be there until February 22nd, and we'll have 6 days in Walt Disney World, no park hopper. I've been downloading many podcasts and listening very intently. I've read through the unofficial guide. I've gone premium on touringplans.com, and I've tried all I can to feel better, more prepared, etc. And I just keep coming back to that feeling of being overwhelmed. Can you help me? I guess so. Newell, are you doing anything?
No, I'll give you right down.
Okay. So far, the tentative itinerary is as follows. Can you tell me if this works or if I'm dead wrong? So this may be a good question for Fred. Tuesday, February 16th, after unpacking, pool, lunch, we'll go to Animal Kingdom for the afternoon, arriving at about 12:30 p.m. Next day on Wednesday, Epcot, early rise, following 2-day plan. Day 1 with leaving park at 11:30 for lunch, swim, and rest until approximately 3 o'clock. Thursday, Hollywood Studios, early rise, following Happy Family Touring Plan, same lunch break planned. Friday, Magic Kingdom, early rise, 2-day plan. Saturday, 2-day plan, day 2, no lunch break, but leaving the park approximately 2-ish. And then Sunday, Magic Kingdom, the second day, 11:30 lunch, swim, rest break, back from 4 o'clock to close. Is this realistic to see and do everything, all that the kids and I want to do? Am I on the right track?
These kids are teenagers, right? You said like 13 and something?
That's the oldest
so
one.
They're not young?
Yeah, 13, 10, 7, 5, and 7 months.
Ooh, yeah, that seems like a lot of days in a row of doing pretty full days, although they are taking breaks, which is probably a good thing.
It seems like on some days, Fred, they're not going back to the park after like their break.
Okay.
It says rest until approximately 3 o'clock, like on Wednesday, but it doesn't say that they're going back to the park after that, so I don't know.
Yeah, so I think they're doing like the 2-day plan, but the afternoon is like optional. So they'll just the morning do a lunch and then come back.
Right.
That would be the only thing I would say is that I would keep those breaks in as long as you can. Like, even though you might feel really good the first and second day, still take the break. Like, take the break because by the fourth and fifth day, the kids especially are going to probably start to feel it.
I agree with you, Fred. I think one thing that a lot of people don't see is that, they're on there on day 1 or 2 and yeah, the kids are fine. We can push them, and it works out generally. But it's very much I forgot the word, but it builds on itself. You know what I mean? Like as you progress through your trip, it adds more and more, not so much stress, but fatigue on everyone. And I think that'll catch up with your kids. You'll have one of those classic Disney World meltdowns, and you want to avoid that, like you said. So take those breaks. Even if you don't think you need them, there's nothing wrong with taking that break, even if you don't feel like you need it, because a little bit of time really helps recharge everybody's batteries, and I think it's great for morale. Yeah, especially with the younger kids. I mean, the breaks back at the pool, might be the highlight of the trip for them. The kids, that are young are going to love doing that. So absolutely.
Yeah. Next
email is from Alex Jacobs, who writes, since I know that you're the studios guy, Matt, I came to you for this question. In the Great Movie Ride finale, the movie montage, what's the name of the song with all the romantic clips? It's a song right before the Star Wars, best movie ever, theme song. Thanks for your help, and say hi to Mike, Maple Len, and the fabulous Annette Hornby. Keep up the great work. Well, Alex, the song is, it's, believe it or not, it's actually Tara's theme from the Gone with the Wind. That's the one where it starts sweeping. Yeah, and then you hear Stella.
Now, what's the best line in that montage, though, Matt? You and I have discussed this.
The best one is, "Shut up, will ya?" W.C. Fields trying to golf in the I think it's the black and white portion still.
Yep.
It's the Mike Newell line because
that cracks me up every time I see it. Shut up, will ya?
Next email is from Brian Seed of Bend, Oregon, who writes, "Been listening to the show since about episode 100, and have been listening to all your comments. Being on the left coast, we get to Disneyland much more often than Walt Disney World, and have become very accustomed to the Fantasmic show at Disneyland. On our last trip to Walt Disney World, we decided to break down and see Fantasmic, having only 3 options during a 10-day trip and going to the second showing on a Thursday evening. Now, in the past, we've avoided the show because of our love for Disneyland version. We knew going in there would be differences, most notably the absence of the Mark Twain riverboat in the finale and Peter Pan sequence that takes the place on the Columbia. What we saw was really strange for someone so familiar with the original Disneyland show. I felt that the story elements carry the show Disneyland were largely absent from the Disney World version, and it was just an excuse to reference as many Disney films as possible. This is not to say that the show is completely without merit, as I felt the Lion King sequence, not in the Disneyland version, was a good addition, but that's where the positive changes ended. Our collective reaction after the show was almost shock at how poor this version was by comparison, and why Disney would alter the show so much, even though there's very little differences in the actual staging, with the exception of the differences in the ships, as stated earlier. Have any of you seen both shows and feel the same way? Fred, have you seen both shows? I haven't seen, other than YouTube, I haven't seen the real one in Disneyland. Have you seen Fantasmic over there?
Yeah, I've seen them. I've seen them both, and I mean, there seems to be a definite left coast bias. Like people that have seen, kind of grew up on that show, really see a major difference. I would definitely say the one in Disneyland is better, just because of some of the elements he mentioned. But I think the one in Disney World has some good things too. I think, first of all, the viewing, the fact that you have an actual theater, permanent theater, makes it a lot easier to view it in Disney World. Disneyland, you're all kind of crowded around the water there, and because you're a lot closer, that the views aren't as good, and you're kind of sitting down at the same level as the stage.
Right.
I kind of like sitting up high in the one in Disney World, so you can kind of see down and see everything.
Yeah, I totally agree about the seating.
Yeah, plus you get, because you're closer, you get wet. Last time I saw it in Disneyland, we got soaked trying to watch it on the far left side there.
Oh, really?
But there's definitely some elements of the show that are done a lot better. I mean, the Peter Pan sequence is probably the best thing that's Disneyland. Yeah,
I really wish they would get rid of the Pocahontas scene, and put Peter Pan in there. I agree with the writer, with the reader over there, listener, that sent in that email, because the Pocahontas scene is probably the dullest part of the whole thing. But I think the merits that you mentioned, the seating especially, are a huge thing. I think anyone who loves the Disneyland show has to admit that the seating arrangement is far better in Walt Disney World. But I agree. I wish we would see the Disneyland version come to Walt Disney World, but it just seems that they're happy with their changes they did over there, because obviously they're not changing much over there. It's been here now for over 10 years. Maybe one day. Next email is from George Long, who writes, I've been listening since this past winter and got some ideas for Walt Disney World for my next trip. I just got back from my trip. I stayed at Fort Wilderness Lodge I think he means Wilderness Lodge, for the first 10 nights, then at Pop Century for 3 nights. Wow, that's quite a downgrade. From the Orlando airport at 12 a.m. Saturday morning, the Magical Express had people going to the lodge and to another resort. On my trip back to the airport from Pop Century, at the 2 o'clock, the Express only took passengers from Pop Century. My guess is that depending on the size and type of the resort, the Magical Express will only make one resort stop for the value versus multiple stops for the luxury resorts. Seems to be the same with the Walt Disney World bus system, based on the size and value of the resorts. Bus goes to the lodge and other luxury resorts versus only Pop Century, only Caribbean Beach, only Port Orleans, where the buses would fill up fast. Yeah, I mean, it's a solid observation. It just has to do with the amount of people. I mean, obviously, they're not going to send a bus that's only a quarter full. There's going to be a lot of people at like Pop Century are going to be wholeheartedly dependent on buses versus people at, like, say, the Grand Floridian. You got the monorail over there, and you've got, so that to the parks, you don't have to take a bus to take. And obviously there's less people staying at those resorts, so you're not going to have quite as much demand. So, but Disney, shares the buses. I've never understood that. I mean, do you guys, I don't know if it's just me, but if you stay at the Contemporary or Polynesian or Grand Floridian, you share the same bus. Like if you're going to the Studios or Animal Kingdom. Yeah. Like you pay all that money. Wouldn't you think you'd get your own bus?
Yeah. Well, they changed this about 4 years ago. We looked at this actually, and what they did was they started to do busing based purely on demand. So you see now, like when you go out in the morning, there's actually a cast member out there that's kind of tracking how many people are in the queues. And that's why, because Pop Century, I mean, it's the biggest resort. It has the most number of rooms. So, the most number of people are going to it's going to take more buses to transport the same, number of people. But yeah, that's right. I mean, I can't imagine staying at the Poly and having to wait for the bus to go around to Contemporary and then to Grand Floridian and then.
Hey, you pay all that money.
It's just because of, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Should be limo service, direct limo service.
Limo service, yeah, that's right. George also writes, a big difference in value of amenities of Wilderness Lodge versus Pop Century. I would have loved to have gone from the Pop to the Lodge, but the buy 4 get 3 free deal and meal plan would not accommodate that. That's something we always talk about. And if you're going to be staying at multiple resorts and they're not on the same level, always go from the worst level, or not worse, but you know what I mean, the less luxurious level up. Exactly, lower level up. So it would have been smart to stay at Pop Century first and then go to the deluxe resort, but well, now you have a great appreciation for Wilderness Lodge there, George. Last thing George writes here. During my visit to the parks in June, excuse me, the lines were bearable, 20 to 30 minute waits, but the new Toy Story ride in Hollywood Studios was the longest, about an hour and a half. That ride was fun, but my arms were tired from pulling that string trigger from side to side, but had a great score.
Oh, yeah.
Good. Next email is from Kelly Trent of Dallas, Texas. Writes, hello to all. I was recently sucked in by Disney's enticing email telling me that I could visit them in December and get some free food. I did free dining a couple years ago in September, and it was awesome. I wasn't able to go this fall because I had a baby, but by December, I felt like maybe she would be okay with my mom or her husband for a few days without me. I then saw a crazy good deal on a flight from Dallas to Orlando, so it was pretty much a done deal at that point. I'm excited to be staying at Scopa Towers for the first time ever, but I need some help on where to eat. I have vowed to try all the new sit-down restaurants this time, so I need some advice. I'm going by myself, so I'm really wondering which of these restaurants would be the best for a solo diner. My first thing is I want to eat somewhere around the boardwalk, so I'm thinking either Flying Fish, Yachtsman Steakhouse, or Captain's Grill. All right, let's start there. So of those three, guys, Flying Fish, Yachtsman, or Captain's Grill for a solo person, what would you recommend?
I got to go Flying Fish, I think. Don't they have that the bar right by the chef's grill where you can sit?
I was about to slam you for picking a seafood restaurant since it's a well-known inside joke that Fred only orders fish at Walt Disney World, but it's right. They do have the bar over there, so I think that's a good point.
Gotta go with the fish.
Yeah, one thing you can do, I'm 99% sure that if you go to the bar next to Yachtsman Steakhouse, I forget what I think it's Captain's Galley.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, something galley. You can order off the Yachtsman menu. Oh. And the reason why we recommend the bars, Kelly, is so that way you don't have to feel like you're sitting at a table by yourself and it's like a bad, you were set up for a date or something. Some people have a problem with that. Yeah. Others don't really care at all. So it's completely up to you. So if you're looking to avoid that, those kind of restaurants would be good because you'll have that bar option for you.
Yeah, usually you can chat up the bartenders and they'll have a conversation with you and it kind of passes the time.
That's right. And then if you chat them up long enough, they recognize you and your wife comes over and you get called out over there.
Sometimes they'll give you freebies too. I've been there before where they'll give you a little, piece of an appetizer or something like that. So hey, try this out.
Oh, good, cool. Kelly writes, next is the Magic Kingdom Resort restaurant. I was thinking either Citrico's, Artist Point, or the Wave. The Wave has a bar, I know for sure. It's got a huge bar actually, and you can order off the menu over there, so that might be an option. No, we were not big fan. Fred, you were there also, right? We all ate at Artist Point that one time at Wilderness Lodge.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. It was okay.
It was okay. Yeah.
I don't know if I'd go there as a solo though, just for the pure fact of that. But
yeah, I would probably go for the Wave. Just Citrico's is great, Kelly, but I would really wait to bring your husband over there. I think there's a bar also, but that restaurant. I think I would rather. I love Citrico's. I would just recommend maybe going with someone else over there because I'm not sure that there's a bar area. I seem to recall there being one, but I could be wrong about that. But the Wave, guaranteed, I'll have one there.
There's an Narcoosse's joke in there, but I'm going to refrain.
Very good. Next email is from... Who is our next email from? It's Dale Engelberger of Walkersville, Maryland, who writes, Dear Matt, Mike, Len, and the Fabulous Annette, I always enjoy the show. Usually I listen to your show while I'm running around this track, and yesterday was no exception. Recently, you were discussing a, quote, ghost at the yacht club. I was quite interested since in 2003, we stayed at the room on the second floor of the yacht club next to the elevator. This appeared to be the exact location where you described the ghost of the yacht club. I have no idea. Do you guys remember? Newell, do you remember the ghost in the yacht club? I don't recall it.
If anyone would have brought that up, it was probably Len.
Yeah. One night there was an incredible scraping on the floor of the room above us, enough to wake the dead.
Yeah.
Anyway, I found it odd that the Disney cast members would be making that much noise in the middle of the night. Kind of weird, but I have thought nothing about this incident until your podcast. Please cue the Twilight Zone music here. Now
wasn't Scopa staying there? Interesting.
Well, he is the dead, so he was woken up.
He is the Walking Dead.
He's just closer to the dead as all of us. Yeah.
Very good. We all got in our dead Scopa.
Okay, Scopa, we're done. We're done.
Here's where it starts to get weird. I'm running around the track listening to your podcast when the segment on the Yacht Club Ghost comes on. At that exact moment on the end of the clip, I trip and fall. It was almost as if a hand reached out and grabbed my big toe.
That could have been Scopa too. Like Scopa would do.
I ended up with a scun knee, punctures on both my hands, and a serious burn on my forearm and shoulder. I'm a little bloody, but nothing too serious. Is it possible that the Yacht Club ghost jumped from Yacht Club through the podcast to the track at Walkersville High? I wonder.
Heck yeah.
Yes, obviously. Duh. Even weirder, when I replayed the segment, I noticed that there was a very rough edit at the end of the story. Did something strange happen in the studio that required an edit? What say you? I'll be sleeping with the lights on. Sincerely freaked out, Dale.
Dale, whatever you do, Dale, don't listen to the podcast backwards. That's a definite no-no.
We got to do that one time, Newell. It'd be like, what's that song? It's not Indigo Davida.
Dark Side of the Moon?
Oh, Dark Side of the Moon. Yeah, that's right.
Play Dark Side at the beginning of the podcast, and it will sync with the show. It's great.
Yeah, and Wizard of Oz. Next email's from Kevin from Fort Wayne, Indiana. He writes, can you tell me what the goat trick on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad is? I remember there being a goat meet at Mouse Fest a couple years ago, but did not attend. Any help to this mystery would be appreciated. Mike, do you know? I know the answer to this. I don't know if you...
I've heard of it, but I really never got involved in the answer to it.
Basically, the premise of it is that there's a goat. It's in the area. If you're kind of looking at Big Thunder Mountain, it's kind of on the left-hand side by the guy in the bathtub spinning around. And there's a goat on the mountain over there. And basically the whole premise of it is that you have to point to the goat and yell goat every time you see it. It's kind of like the Volks Punch buggy thing, except you do it all the time. And evidently it adds a different dimension to the ride. Next email is from Brett Ward, but to come to Tent Fest, yeah.
The cousin that Mickey doesn't talk about.
Is it Brett Ward? Yeah, that's right. Brett Ward writes, I'll call into a live show and explain why my experience at Citrico's was so horrifying and why Mexico gets a bad rap. On one thing I did want to bring out is why the unofficial guide, All Ears Net, and other resources are so valuable. Without them, I never considered giving a restaurant a second chance. When the majority rave about a place and you have an awful experience, at least you know if you go back there, there's a good chance it'll be better. The only reason I'd ever consider going back to Citrico's is because of the various positive reviews. That being said, you have to keep buying the guides and checking the reviews. Things change. There was a day when Artist Point was one of the best restaurants in Disney World. There was also a day when Le Cellier was a cafeteria and served slop.
Slop.
The Canadian slop.
Quite a delicacy up there, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Along with dead penguins and, baby seals.
Was it served in like a tin cup? They serve it like that?
Please, sir, can I have another?
Yeah, can I have some more?
No. Whack.
No,
We missed the obvious joke.
Exactly. Now get out.
One thing, but Brett brings up a good point is that you have when you hear a lot of great things about certain restaurants, I think you're almost forced to keep trying them because you want to see what everyone's talking about. And I think I definitely do that. I'm trying to think of Yachtsman Steakhouse was a restaurant that I tried initially purely because I heard such great things about it. And I said, well, I got to go check it out. And there's other restaurants you can add to that. And I think that kind of adds to the hype. I think the popularity of Le Cellier it's definitely deserved. I think it is a good restaurant, but I think it also might be a little artificial because there's so much hype around the restaurant. Do you guys know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's small. So just the very idea that it's tough to get a reservation makes people think, must be something to it.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always nice to be able to try new places anyway, but it's good to know that using those resources like you mentioned, like All Ears Net, like the unofficial guide, you get that kind of feedback from people. And, I just tried last week, in fact, on the Contemporary, California Grill. And that one I heard such great things about, but I really wasn't that impressed by it. Have any of you guys ever eaten there?
Yeah, I ate there back in September. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say, they changed the menus over the years. So at one time, a restaurant might have been fantastic.
Yep.
And as new chefs come in and change things up, sometimes they kind of lose their sparkle, so to speak. So they don't, what might have been good 2 years ago is now so-so today.
Yeah. It wasn't bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it was a bad restaurant. It's just I expected it to be like that, one of those amazing Walt Disney World restaurants. And I don't think it quite reached that level, and that was my issue with it. But I'll be sure to complain to one of our listeners, Janine, who loves that restaurant and eats there like Scopa eats it at Le Cellier. So it'll be fun. Next email is from Jamie from Lexington, Kentucky. He writes, first, I love your podcast. I recently found them, and I'm now addicted. Thanks for all the great information. My mom and I will be traveling to Walt Disney World soon. This will be our fifth trip. We always use the unofficial guide. It saves us so much time. This time, however, we have a bit of an issue. Our favorite park is Disney's Hollywood Studios. Nice. and it's scheduled to close early on 2 of the days of our trip due to a private event. When do you think we should go during our trip to have the best experience and less crowds? Mom doesn't do well with crowds. I don't want her to get cranky. Well, she's talking about a different event here, Night of Joy. Obviously, this is an email that's way past. Wow. Yeah. So, but regardless, if sometimes the studios just close for private events. Just last week, I believe they had a company bought out some hours, and the studios closed at say 6:00. But Fred, how would you think that would affect crowds? Would you expect people on a day where the park hours are significantly lower to have a day where people just avoid the park altogether because they see the park hour and say, "Ooh, I ain't going there"? Or are people just oblivious to it and they just show up anyway, and you're just going to end up with less time to do all the stuff you'd like to do?
Well, usually, as a general rule, shorter park hours means less crowd. So I think, certainly with the Magic Kingdom, and I think that's the case for other parks as well. Just because, it's tougher to get in a kind of a full day. You feel like you're not getting your money's worth, especially for people that are, on resort who have a limited number of tickets. They say, well, we'd rather push it back to a day when it's open longer. Usually the thing is that you might not notice a huge difference in the morning, because another thing that happens is that's going to encourage park hoppers. Uh-huh. So people might go in the morning and then, and say, okay, the park's closing in a couple hours anyway. Right. And we'll hop to their park. So, generally it's going to be lower crowds. And I think at the studios, I don't know how much earlier it closed, but, it seems like you could probably get a full touring plan in at the studios, even with a shortened day, I would think.
Yeah, you can, if you get to the park early and everything. If that's your only day, I wouldn't necessarily advise against going to it. But if you can swing it, obviously getting more time in the park may be a better option over there. So it really kind of depends on what your rest of your schedule is before you can recommend it. But I think what we're basically saying is it's not the end of the world. If that's the case. All right, time for our last question of the day. And that means I will give Mr. Newell 3 options to choose from, 3 emails. One email gets read today. The other 2 go back into the email queue to be answered later. Are you ready, Mike?
Yes, sir.
All right. Your options are, thanks for the guilt, boys. Ooh. In falsetto voice. Falsetto mic is really high.
Wishes.
All right. So in falsetto voice. Oh, Len.
I can say that for Len.
Or question for Newell: dare I test fate and say, quote, bet you don't have this one in your music collection?
Ooh.
Them's fighting words.
Bring it on.
All right,
bring it on, kid.
Last email of the day.
You're gonna lose.
Last email of the day is from Karen from Jacksonville, Florida, who writes, Mike Newell, being such a Disney music buff, I am daring to test destiny and surprise you with my find. Have you ever heard of Dave Brubeck? Amazing jazz artist my dad loved. In a search for Disney music, you've heard of Dave Brubeck, Mike?
No.
You haven't really? I have some Dave Brubeck. See,
I have, yeah.
He's good. It's Take the A Train. That's one of his big tracks over there. Anyway, in a search for Disney music, I found what would have been his Nirvana. Dave made on an album called Dave Digs Disney a phenomenal and unique take on some classics, and one to consider adding to your collection, especially if an LP version is available. He also does a version of When You Wish Upon a Star on his This Is Jazz album that I hold near and dear. Whenever I go get to Missing Dad, I take a listen and feel that all is right with the world, knowing that his 2 favorite things, jazz and Disney, came together. Hope I surprise you. Love the warm fuzzies from the state where the sunshine is kept. In your defense, Mike, though, I think you don't play on Mouse World Radio movie music. It's theme park music only. My Mouse World is generic theme park music. I do have some generic tracks that I have. Some people do collect that kind of music. I like listening to it. I don't necessarily go out of my way to find it, because my thing is theme park music. So that's really where I go.
If Dave Brubeck would play that from a bush in behind like Rock and Roller Coaster or something,
I'm there.
Then you're there.
Yeah,
I'm for sure.
Dave Brubeck is great music to have playing on like Sunday morning if you're making breakfast in your house, and it's kind of like that low key kind of thing. That's this kind of music.
I love that music. It just doesn't fit really. But, yeah.
You are excused. It's no problem, Mike. Your reputation is untarnished, sir. And don't forget, that's it for us today. But this episode of WDW Today has been sponsored by MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. And hey, planning your next trip to Walt Disney World can be really easy on you. You don't have to go through jumping a lot of hoops and making your hotel reservation, making your ADRs. You got to make special requests for this and your kids need this and this. Don't worry about all that stuff, because guess what? The travel agents at MEI and Mouse Fan Travel will take care of all that stuff. That's what I do. I give them all my requirements. I need only green M&Ms. I need to make sure I have a room on the second floor facing north, and they do their best to get it for me. But they'll take care of you. Try them at www.mousefantravel.com. If you want to find our older episodes, read our show notes, or send us your comments, visit the WDW Today website at wdwtoday.com. For our line test to Mike Soap and Mike Newell and Fred Hazelton, I'm Matt Hochberg. We'll see you on the next show.
Stupid Judy, stupid energy.
This has been a production of Mouse World Radio.